Got a big idea for your business? That's a great first step. And a team of business bankers at BMO Harris wants to help you make it official. Sourcing inventory? Opening a second location? Doubling last year's sales or, fingers crossed, tripling them?
We're sold out of everything.
With expert advice, seamless account openings, and up to a $500 bonus with a new business checking account, we'll help make your business goals official. Visit a branch to get started today. Terms and conditions apply. When a bank helps you make it real, that's real financial progress.
Hi, this is Laura Vanderkam. I'm a mother of 5, an author, journalist, and speaker.
And this is Sarah Hart Unger. I'm a mother of 3, a practicing physician, and blogger on the side. We are 2 working parents who love our careers and our families.
Welcome to Best of Both Worlds. Here we talk about how real women manage work, family, and time for fun. From figuring out childcare to mapping out long-term career goals, we want you to get the most out of life. Welcome to Best of Both Worlds. This is episode 188, which is airing in early March of 2021. I will be interviewing Dr. Christine Koh, who is the co-host of the Edit Your Life podcast. She's also an author and a social media person and all around, great person. I don't know how to describe. She has a lot of different roles, and that's one of the things we talk about in this episode, because she's definitely into the concept of minimalism. She also has a varied career, and so we'll talk about how that plays in and how very busy people can organize all of those things without getting too crazy in any given one of them. But yeah, Sarah's been listening to the Edit Your Life podcast that Christine co-hosts, and so we were thinking of some of our favorite podcast listening hacks. Is that what I'm supposed to transition into that?
Sure. Podcast listening hacks. Well, and you could also mention that you're going to be on Edit Your Life at some point.
I am. So I may have by the time, well, I'm not sure quite how the order is going with all this, but yeah, soon, if not already.
And we'll let you know if we when we see that come up as well, because that will be a fun mashup for those of you who don't listen to Edit Your Life to get an introduction. But yeah, okay, so you shared my screenshot podcast hack, I believe, on Before Breakfast.
I did. It's actually today's episode when we're recording this in February.
But what are the chances of that? That's so cool.
Yeah. So share what the hack is.
Yeah, so my screenshot hack is the dumbest thing ever, but I just realized because a lot of times I'll listen to a podcast while running, and then I'll be and especially when you're running, you have endorphins, and you're like, that person knows the secret to the universe. I must capture this brilliant idea. And so, but you're but I'm running. How am I going to? And then I realized if I unlock my phone, I can actually screenshot and it will show my podcast player anyway, where I was, which podcast was playing and where I was in the podcast. So I can actually go back to that specific moment. Sometimes I may be disappointed and find out that it was more the running high that made me, but I've done that a few times. Most recently, I've been doing it on my Sunday long run. I like to listen to No Stupid Questions, which is with Stephen Dubner and Angela Duckworth. And I think I just love that podcast. I like it. I love Freakonomics, but I like this even more. And I'm always that was a brilliant insight. And then I can screenshot it and go back to it. So
I love it. Well, screenshots are good in general. I mean, it's just anything that you aren't entirely sure you're going to use, but you wanted to capture. It's a very quick way to take a note without, relying on some sort of note-taking function on your phone or having a pen with you or something like that.
I feel like Apple needs to get a little better so that you could Google your screenshots. If they could get to the point, Google Photos is excellent. If I have all my photos uploaded and I Google black cat, it'll find the 3 photos over 10 years where there's a black cat. I don't feel that functionality is there on my iPhone yet, but Apple, if you are listening, we need to be able to
It's your next
search.
billion-dollar idea from Sarah. Yes, exactly.
We need to be able to search our screenshots.
All right. What speed do you listen to?
Generally 1.5, unless it's a music podcast. That's the one exception. My All Songs Considered is the one podcast where obviously I can't listen to that sped up. I'm at the point where if I try to listen to something at 1.0, I'm this is so boring. Who could sit here through this? Yeah, so we differ on that, don't we?
Oh, do we differ? So my husband may listen to things at 1.5 or 2 speed or whatever when he's in the car. And so suddenly when we're all in the car and he puts on his phone, we'll be listening to voices coming at 1.5 speed. And I'm just I can't take it. I cannot take it. And I don't necessarily think that I'm a highly sensitive person or whatever, but it just, it makes it's like fingernails grating on a chalkboard to me. So I will listen. There are plenty of people who talk fast enough. I mean, I've been told that my before breakfast speaking speed is not off what like somebody might talk at 1.5, but I feel like there's a certain, what do I say, that your voice is part of your instrument and your pacing is part of that. And so if you're listening at a different speed than the content creator wanted you to be listening to, it's something like reading the cliff notes of your book. And so I understand it like that, yes, if you are about to take a final exam on this and you didn't have time to read it, there is a purpose for doing that. But if the point is entertainment and in general enjoyment, then the content creator had something that they were doing with their voice. And
my argument is that my brain will adjust. I don't know. I do get what you're saying. Are podcasts that level of artistry? I mean, we're recording right now. I don't know if I can elevate my pauses to quite. Well, that is why I would never listen to a music podcast. I mean, that would be crossing the line. Like, that would be terrible because that is art and you would mess it up and it would be so. But that is a very interesting take. And Josh does not like sped up podcasts either. So we have that like.
Maybe it's an introversion thing, right? Because I know you're more, maybe you're comfortable with more sort of vocal filling of space. I get frustrated when multiple children are talking at the same time or talking loudly. And so I think it has something to do with that.
Oh, that's interesting. And then the funny thing is, I'm not even like a fast reader. So I don't know why I feel like I need the information to come at me like a fire hose when I'm listening to podcasts. And there are people that are faster than me. So I do 1.5 usually, maybe 1.75 in a slow talker. I recently polled my best laid plans listeners because I also feel like I talk pretty fast. And I partly attribute that to, oh my God, I feel like my podcast model is listening at 1.5 speed. So does that train me to speak faster on my own podcast? I don't know. And somebody wrote to me that they listen to all their podcasts at 2x, except for Best Laid Plans, which they listen at 1.9x. So I guess I'm not that fast.
1.9. I didn't even know you could do that. I thought this was in discrete multiples of like 0.5, but
I think it would depend on the player that you're using.
Player, that's true. Okay. All right. Well, there we go. Shall we just go over to what? Okay.
No. I have one more podcast thing.
One more podcast thing.
I think it's totally okay to subscribe to way more podcasts than you're going to listen to. And it actually helps the podcast creators to some extent because every download counts. And then you can always have multiple topics to choose from. The only thing is then you need some sort of like deleting ritual. And you can either set your phone to auto delete things after they have, a certain number of episodes. Or I have this new thing like on Friday, I just go through and I get rid of like everything I know I'm not going to listen to. But I actually feel good like, oh, I'm keeping that on my queue because I'm supporting this maybe smaller podcaster with downloads. Excellent. Maybe that's bad to admit that because like I'm sure the advertisers want people to hear every word that is being sold, but whatever.
There we go. All right, well, let's go over to Christine and hear what she has to say. Well, Sarah and I are delighted to welcome Christine Koh to the program. So Christine, tell us all about your wonderful projects.
Oh boy. Well, hi, Laura. This is really exciting to be on the show. I guess in a nutshell, the quickest way to describe me is I used to be a neuroscientist. I was a music and brain scientist for many years, got a PhD, did a postdoc, and then decided to pivot, not surprisingly, like once I had kids and all that. And I've since built a career that's involved a blog, a book, Minimalist Parenting, a couple podcasts like you. I'm a dual podcaster with Edit Your Life and Hello Relationships, which I do with my therapist husband. And what else? I'm a creative director at a social media for social good agency called Women Online. And my husband and I weirdly also have a sort of advocacy apparel collection. Such a weird assortment of things.
It is such a mix. And is the apparel all in your basement? Is that,
well, it used
how does that fit into all this?
I know. At the very beginning, it used to be. And now, thank goodness, we outsource our production, which makes life a lot easier.
Yes. Or at least gives you your basement space back, which, as listeners of the Edit Your Life podcast know, part of editing your life is editing your space, right?
It sure is. Yeah. We've actually recently talked a lot. Actually, our top episode from 2020 was on pandemic home decluttering and styling. And I just think everybody's home a lot more. They're paying attention and really trying to optimize. So that's definitely been important.
And you have 2 children who are currently doing virtual learning, right?
They are. One is hybrid at the moment. The other was hybrid, but switched to remote. So, they're on, like your kids, everybody's schedule is kind of different. And we are just kind of juggling and trying to make it all work.
Yeah, exactly. You were one of the early internet pioneers. So Boston Mamas, I think, has been around since what, 2006?
2006. So old.
So what made you think back then, like this is, we need hyper local blog type coverage?
Yeah, I know.
Especially since you're a neuroscientist. Like where did this, you're like, I know what the world needs right now.
Well, since I know that you and I are both very data oriented people, I will say that when I became a parent, people were constantly, I sort of went through that phase where a bunch of friends were also becoming parents. I'm sure that that's happened with you as well. And people would ask me because they know I would sort of research things ad nauseum. And at one point I was like, wow, it would just be nice if I had like a central place to just drop all this information so I didn't have to keep emailing it to people. And one of my tech friends was like, you need a blog. And I'm like, what is that? But I would say despite the fact that there are all these different projects that I do, I think the real thread that runs through all of them is that I've always been somebody who looks for sort of a hole, that a need that exists and I want to fill it. So at that time, Boston had calendar sites. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to like work on managing event listings, but it needed sort of like a lifestyle portal of some kind. And so I set about to fill it and it kind of like took off. I didn't even expect that really to happen, but it did.
Which is wonderful and still exists, right?
Still exists, still churning.
So you do so many things in your life, but with the Edit Your Life podcast, one of the things you talk about is editing the unnecessary. What does it mean to edit the unnecessary from your life?
It's really all about figuring out what matters to you. I know we're aligned in this, figuring out your values and what you really want to do with your time. And I feel like the baseline thing, and Asha and I, Asha Dornfest is my co-host at the Edit Your Life podcast and also, our book, Minimalist Parenting. And one of the things that we talk about in the book is that editing really starts with like what we call a more or less list. So it could be really like on the back of an envelope. It could be in a pretty bullet journal. It could be in a Google Doc, but just like quickly jotting down, like, what do you want more of and what do you want less of? And it can just help you, that simple action. I'm talking like brainstorm for like 20 seconds or something. It just helps you prioritize and really have a visual on what you would like to make more space for in your life, and then what you can like work on getting rid of really intentionally. And I think the thing that I like about that list is that you can apply to anything, whether it's home, time, work, whatever.
And one of the things that's interesting to me with this is a lot of the talk of minimalism. I mean, there are people who are saying things like, we don't want to do any things this weekend, right? Like we did things during the week. There's no things to be done on the weekend. Or, I want to do nothing with my time. And you do so many different things. So how does minimalism work when you have, a dozen different professional hats?
Yeah. Well, I think that the probably unsatisfying public answer is that it's not a one size fits all solution. Everybody's going to have, every family, I feel like even will have a different baseline for how busy they like to be, in a given week. Some families have a pretty low threshold for how many things they want to commit to in a week. Others really, really like to be busy, and that's fine. But I think the key is figuring out like, I sort of joke about the book is all about like figuring out where your baseline of crazy is, and then just like figuring out a few degrees of freedom that you can insert, a few things that you can get rid of, the stuff that you really don't want to do anyway, just to give yourself a little more breathing room.
And what sorts of things have you managed to edit that are unnecessary out of your life lately?
Oh, wow. Well, it's so interesting. The irony of the pandemic is that, life has been edited
for you
so massively for us. But I think that I am really picky about my time. My schedule during the week is really quite full of meetings. And so I routinely go through and look at the calendar and try to figure out, okay, is this really, if the calendar is super full, for example, on a given week, And I know I'm personally somebody who really needs some like runways of time and chunks of time, ideally 2 or 3 hour blocks of time where I can just kind of focus on work. Then I'll move stuff around. I'll edit meetings. I'll see if I can move it to a different week, that kind of thing. Social is not happening as much, but I am really picky about, that time and have prioritized in knowing how good it is for my mental health, having at least one friend connection every weekend, whether it's Zoom, whether it's, just, a walk around the neighborhood, something, the things that we need to add in because they nurture us and they fill us up are really just as important as the stuff we need to shed.
Excellent advice. Well, we're going to take a quick break and we will be back in just a few minutes. Hey, listeners. Here at Best of Both Worlds, we love sleep. We want you to get the best sleep possible. A big part of that is sleeping on the right mattress. Helix has several different mattress models to choose from. They have soft, medium, and firm mattresses. They even have mattresses that are great for cooling you down if you sleep hot. I took the Helix quiz and I was matched with the Dusk mattress model because I sleep on my stomach. The mattress is awesome and delivery and setup are fast and easy. Just go to helixsleep.com/bestof, take their 2-minute sleep quiz, and they'll match you to a customized mattress that will give you the best sleep of your life. They have a 10-year warranty, and you get to try it out for 100 nights risk-free. They'll even pick it up for you if you don't love it, but you will. Helix is offering up to $200 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners at helixsleep.com/bestof. That's helixsleep.com/bestof. Hey listeners, as many of you know, I will be moving soon. And as part of that, I am cleaning out my closet. That brings me to the topic of Poshmark. Poshmark is a free app where you can easily clean out your closet and sell items for cash. Just download the app using my referral code, BESTOFBOTH10, and you'll get $10 off your first purchase. There are tons of lightly used or even brand new items with tags on Poshmark, so you can shop for your next event or vacation. Shipping is so fast, and the app is so easy to use. It's also fun, because you get to practically shop for free with the money you make from sales. Listeners of Best of Both Worlds get $10 off your first purchase. Just enter the invite code BESTOFBOTH10 when you sign up. That's invite code BESTOFBOTH10. BESTOFBOTH 10. Hey listeners, is anything interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? If so, BetterHelp can help. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can connect in a safe and private online environment and start communicating in under 48 hours. Send a message to your counselor anytime, and you'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, all without ever having to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if that is needed. Anything you share is, of course, completely confidential. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at betterhelp.com/bestof. Join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's betterhelp, HELP.com/bestof. So I am here with Christine Koh, who has all sorts of hats that she wears, but many of our listeners know her from the Edit Your Life podcast. And so we're talking a little bit about how we can edit our lives to be more awesome. And one of the reasons you say we edit the unnecessary is because it leaves space for awesomeness. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what sort of awesomeness have you seen come into life, like when people leave more open space?
Well, I think that the word hobby, or the word like, the phrase like things that bring you joy. I know they're a little like trite and overused, but I think they matter so much. One thing I hear from our listeners and just, so many people on social media, that the simplest things like books, like plants and giving love to plants, like taking time to like make a batch of cookies with your kids. All these like super simple things are things that really matter to people. And I think that, when you kind of cut out some of the stuff that's, giving you anxiety or really making you unhappy, and you have the room to insert that stuff, like that's where the gold is. And I actually kind of love that it's those simple little things oftentimes that people really need in their life to feel a little bit more whole.
Yeah. And interesting, many of those things are kind of in our homes right now.
Yeah.
You're talking about the plants, the baking, all pandemic friendly. But I think a lot of folks are finding their physical spaces a little bit harder to edit of late, as everyone is on top of each other. So let's talk some tips for home organization and editing that have been useful, especially now.
Yeah. I have two sort of key things that are top of mind that I think will be a common experience that a lot of people are struggling with. One is, personally, I have become sort of command center now. Instead of working in my office, working at the dining room table. And, the reality is there's just so much more clutter creep now that everybody is home 24/7. And for some people, that doesn't bother them. For somebody like me, it kind of bothers me. It makes it harder for me to focus. So if that is you, I recommend carving out some little space, whether it's your home office, whether it's even just a corner of a room, over which you can sort of organize it and make it yours. And I think you just have to like be okay with the rest of it. If you live in a home with other people, like, it's going to be very difficult and kind of a losing battle to control exactly what everybody else does, I feel. So I think having sort of a little sacred space of your own, even if it's really small, is so crucial. And then the other thing I would recommend is perhaps even embracing an imperfect space if it fills you up in a different way. So we got a pandemic dog, which has
as did everyone, right?
As did everybody, which, has changed a lot of things. But one of the things that I have been just unwilling to give up, because the pandemic dog would really ideally love to sleep in our room with us. But we have this sort of weird space. It's a really weirdly shaped bedroom, but there's this weird space that tends to become a repository for laundry, clean laundry that just gets dumped on the floor before it moves on to like where it needs to go. And for a while I tried to battle the laundry, but now I just roll out my yoga mat amidst the laundry, and it's imperfect, but it's where I do my thing. And that's really important. So I think sometimes we get a little stuck on wanting to make something really perfect. And it really doesn't need to, as long as it can help you get to the goal of like doing the thing that you actually want to do.
Sounds like good advice. But if there was one sort of thing you could do to make, the place feel a little bit less cluttered, is there any strategies? Let's say families who are doing virtual learning, there's just all the added paper printables that comes with that.
Yeah, well, I will say that I think that doing like even just like setting a timer and doing a 10-minute family cleanup, like if we only have 4 people in our house, but if you actually set a timer and just go through the sort of main high traffic area in your house and do simple stuff like toss all the random papers into the recycling, put the shoes into the bins or whatever the shoe shelves that you have, put the jackets in the closet. These are like super lightning fast things that can make a difference in just a matter of minutes. So I would definitely recommend, instead of getting resentful about doing it on your own, have a 10-minute family cleanup time. I mean, my family always sort of like rolls their eyes when I'm like, okay, family cleanup time, but they do it and it's quick and it's painless. And, if you put on music, actually, it can be kind of fun.
Yeah. How about with your children, have you asked them to do more around the house since they've been around more?
Oh, yes. Well, I'm a big fan of chores and kids. I refer to them as life skills. I mean, these are the things that kids need to learn how to be functioning, in the world. They're really a good thing. I would say the key thing that they've really leveled up on is making their own lunch and helping themselves to snack and all those transitions that I think that's been very chaotic for a lot of parents with remote school is when your kids are on different schedules, especially, and they're eating at different times. And, instead of you having to get up all the time, it's, them taking on that stuff. And then I think also I would say, with kids, you have to kind of remind them. So, one thing at one point I sort of got my knickers in a bunch about, I said, okay, when the dishwasher is clearly empty, or there's room in it, instead of putting the dish on the counter above the dishwasher, open the door and put it in.
It's such a simple thing.
Such a simple thing, but it needed a few reminders. And then my 9-year-old was like, got it. Okay. But it did take, you have to remind kids because it is just not going to be top of mind for them. But do a couple of reminders. And I think after a week or so, they will, start to get in a rhythm with it.
Yeah, no, I love that point from our mutual friend, KJ, who's been a guest on this podcast as well. But her point that it's two separate things of doing chores and doing chores without being reminded. And if you let go of the second part, you can definitely get the chores done. But so don't hold out that as what you need to make happen, right? That everyone does chores without being reminded because it may never happen. And then you're just never getting the chores done. So, it's okay. You'll remind people. Yeah,
it's developmentally appropriate that they're going to just need reminders. So just remember that. It's not like something's wrong with them. It's not like they're trying to frustrate you. It's just they're kids.
We had a fun little life skills moment the other day. Everyone's sheets and covers were washed. And I was like, I do not want to put these back on anyone's bed. I do not feel like doing it. And so everyone was charged with doing it themselves. And it took people, an interesting amount of time to figure out
how to put a top sheet on,
how to put a top sheet on, or how to stuff a duvet type thing back in a cover.
Oh, we had that same experience with it is a little confusing.
Which is why I don't like doing it. But I feel like I shouldn't be the only person who
absolutely. I'm so glad you did that. That I think will help them develop a good appreciation too.
Of what goes into actually doing the sheets in the laundry around
It is my least favorite, I will admit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Christine, when this is all over, I'm not quite sure an air date on this, but eventually life is going to return something to normal. Mm-hmm. What are you most looking forward to doing?
Oh my gosh. I think that in a really simple way, I would just say hugging people I care about, like my mother. I do miss, it's interesting. I've thought a lot because I before pandemic, I traveled all the time for work. And sometimes it would be, more extended trips. Sometimes it would be the day trip in and out of DC. And this has made me rethink, is that really necessary? The day trip when we could otherwise kind of conference call in, wouldn't that be sort of better for the planet and our schedules and our fatigue and everything? So it is making me rethink some of that stuff, but I do, miss travel in general. And, seeing people and collaborating in person, that is definitely, one thing that I miss a lot.
Yeah, me too. So let's just do a quick run through of a day in the life of Christine. So, most of us aren't really going anywhere these days. So there's sort of less back and forth. But you're doing your yoga amid the laundry, and what happens after that?
Well, so I usually get up around, actually, Kirsty, I'm fairly regimented, but I usually get up around 6:30. I need to have my coffee. I just have 1 cup in the morning, but I really need to have it. My life is happier if I set it up the night before. I get up usually at 7 a.m. I start work. My husband sort of transitions in and, gets the kids settled and helps with the dog and all this. I do my yoga at 7:30 and I'm talking about sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be, it's, whatever the practice is that day, but it's never an hour.
Is it a program or you doing a specific?
I use Yoga with Adriene, which KJ introduced me to, and I'm just following along with a sort of playlist for, the month that she put together. So it's kind of I guess my point is, I think a lot of times people get in their mind that in order to take care of themselves, they need to have an hour. And it's not always the case. It could be 10 minutes is better than no minutes. And then I'm basically round robining with different client projects all morning. Morning is my sort of best time up to lunch to really, really dig in with things. Also because pandemic dog is usually napping. Take him out for a lunch walk. And then it's like just more juggling through the end of the day. But I will say that in the evening, it's super important to me to not be working in the evening, actually, which is kind of the opposite of what a lot of entrepreneurs do. So I can connect with my husband, who I really like, and my kids. We prioritize reading time and sort of cuddling time. And then I'm like in bed with a book by like 9:30. I love sleeping. I'm like an ideally, could I have 9 hours of sleep, please, a night person.
Sounds really nice. And I'm glad to hear that you like your husband.
Yeah, he's
10, 11 months into pandemic sheltering in place here.
I know I have thought about that. That is a real gift. Our family, we've been hanging in okay. It's not easy all the time. I was sort of the biggest disaster in the fall, just trying to get used to the new schedule. But, I think people are figuring it out, and it's not been easy, but I think we can do hard things, as they say.
We can do hard things. Well, we always end with a love of the week. So this is something that is really cool for you right now. Could be a book, album, podcast, object, tool, productivity thing. So what's exciting for you right now, Christine?
Oh boy. Well, I have two things, but one's pretty hippie-ish, so I'll share a little more accessible one. But I have a papered newspaper subscription,
Ooh.
delivered to the door, which was a sort of gift from a good friend of mine, because my friend Casey and I had been joking online about newspapers, and actually, like your fitted sheet or your making the bed example, I had been joking about how funny it was the first time I watched my kids try to fold a newspaper back together. And so literally 30 seconds later, I got an email saying, "You've just received a subscription to the Boston Globe." And so it turns out my friend, as a lovely gift, had given a subscription to the Globe. And I will say, which is, the local city paper, I will say that having a print newspaper has been so fascinating, and everybody in the family interacts with it. And we talk about the newspaper, and we play games in the newspaper. So if you're looking to shake things up a little bit, it's been a really delightful old school way to sort of connect and, also stay tuned into things that are happening in your neighborhood.
Yeah, I could say my love of the week, maybe the Wall Street Journal. Then we subscribe to that. And it's fun just to see something that you didn't click on, right? You weren't. There's a bit more serendipity to it than all the algorithms online. It's exactly what you want to see and they know you're going to want to see. But then you're reading the newspaper and it's like, here's a story about Neanderthals. Which I joke about because that set me off on a 6-month reading spree of stories of ancient humanity.
Wow.
But that's what happened from an article. So, there's just that serendipitous element that's really cool.
Yeah. And every now and then, sorry, my last comment on that is just that every now and then it might create a connection to another relationship. I was just reading the paper this week. I saw a friend's food company featured in the food section of the paper, and I, shared it on Instagram stories and tagged them, and they were so excited. And I'm going to mail the paper clipping to them. I mean, how cute.
Mail a paper clipping?
Yes.
That's awesome.
It's so, there's something just so lovely and old school. I mean, we are in old fashioned times right now. So let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Everyone subscribe to a paper, clip articles, mail them to each other.
Yeah.
You'll probably feel happier. That's our happiness and productivity tip for today. All right. Well, Christine, thank you so much for joining us. Tell our listeners where they can find you.
Well, if you want to learn more about all the different projects, I think the easiest place to go is ChristineKoh.com. I'm Dr. Christine Koh on the socials. And of course, if you're in your podcast app already, Edit Your Life is the podcast I do that is probably very synergetic with, or is synergetic with what you guys do. And then Hello Relationships, my podcast with my therapist husband, we're coming up on a new season soon. So that's also a fun listen.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure we'll all check you out. Thanks for coming on, Christine.
Thanks so much.
All right. Well, that was our episode, our interview with Christine Koh. We have a question from potentially a budding podcaster. What do you think, Sarah?
I do. I don't know, but that was my hypothesis. So I'm like, well, why else would they want to know?
Want to know?
But this came from Instagram. It's from somebody named Camille. so I don't know what her podcast might be, but she wrote, how far in advance do you plan your episodes?
Well, the answer has changed a little bit. We've gotten a bit more into batch recording, especially as we decided to divvy up the interviews a bit more. That it turns out it just makes more sense, I think, to do a one-on-one interview. It's easier to manage the conversation, to direct the flow of questions, and then it's easier for scheduling because we don't have to try to strong arm guests to come on during the time where both of us are available. So it just opens up the possibilities a bit more in terms of when we can, get various guests and offering time to them. But then, we try to do maybe 2 guests a month and 2 us episodes a month, and we can record the us episodes at the same time.
Yeah, and we try not to get too far ahead because we know that there's something about podcasting where you want the content to be fresh and kind of the moment. But as you were saying, you kind of have to balance that because if you try to be too fresh, then you're going to really get into some stress in terms of like the production timeline. And we do always have to be ready with our Tuesday episode by around the Thursday of the week before. So there's always at least a little bit of lag time.
Yeah, just so our production people can get it sounding better and, uploaded to the appropriate places with the ads in it and so forth. I have a rhythm with Before Breakfast, which is my other podcast, where I send in a lineup to my producer on Monday for the following Monday to Friday week. So if Monday of the week we were recording this was February 15th, so on the 15th, I sent in the lineup for February 22nd to 26th. Which means that I have generally recorded the 22nd to 26th then by the 12th, because I would have done it the previous week. So it's about 10 to 14 days ahead of time, at least. And then depending on when during the week I recorded, it might be more like, 14 to 16 days ahead of time. And the reason to do this, I've found, partly it's just with the daily podcast. If I was trying to do it every day, I would, there's no efficiencies to be gained there if you're not batching. But it would also just be, maddening if stuff went wrong in my life and I couldn't get to doing it. But I think it's enough ahead of time that it's set and I can think about it and, not have to come up with something right in the moment because I'm pressed for time. But on the other hand, it's not so far ahead that it's like, okay, well, I've recorded September and February, and who knows if what all the world will be like then. Sarah and I had to wind up shelving, was it like 1 or 2 episodes that we recorded last year in February around this time? Because then, we're like getting out the door in the morning. How do we get out the door in the morning? And then nobody was getting out the door in the morning.
Yeah, you can't, there are certain things, and there are probably, maybe someday if something terrible happens, I'd rather skip a week than air something completely ridiculous. So hopefully nothing will happen of that magnitude, but.
We shall see. Life comes at you fast, but, we then did a few bonus COVID episodes too as we were adjusting to it. So I guess it all comes out in the wash. But yeah, I think it's almost always better to be somewhat ahead because the upsides of not scrambling are more than the downsides of occasionally having to re-record when the world does get away from you. So that's my advice there. A little bit ahead, not too far ahead. You do best laid plans in batches though, right?
Sometimes I try to do it at least a week ahead. The episodes are shorter, so it doesn't feel as high pressure. I'm like, if I can think of some review and topic to talk about, like sometimes I'll just do one at a time. So actually, yeah, I think I do less batching for that. Maybe because it's just one person, so it feels more low key if I'm just jumping on. I have batched my interviews though. I did like 2 back-to-back interviews last week, and it was like, yeah. Content.
All right. Well,
All right. Love of the week.
Yeah.
I didn't put mine on.
Sorry.
I didn't put mine on, but I did write one down. Do you have one?
I'll come up with something. Go for it.
Okay, awesome. Well, maybe you did one with Christine. I don't know. But mine is Google Drive because it is a really, really lovely way to share like spreadsheets and stuff. And we have like a very functioning one right now for this podcast, which only took us like a couple of years to do. But it's working really nicely.
I will admit that possibly Sarah has been in the spreadsheet a bit more than I have. It's good to have a podcast co-host who's very organized.
But you know what? It's great to have something shared where you know that the other person can look at any time if needed. So
that's true. Better
like
than, emailing Excel back and forth too. I use Google Docs for some things. I've done that for a couple of bigger projects now when I need to have multiple people viewing something. I mean, a lot of the stuff I write is just me, really, until I turn it in. So I never write stuff in Google Docs. I do it in whatever the default Apple Pages is on my laptop. And then I just cut and paste over to Google Docs if I need to have a sharing system with multiple people. We'll see how that evolves over time, but that's just, what it works for me right now. All right, well, this has been Best of Both Worlds. I've been interviewing Dr. Christine Koh in the interview section. We've been talking a lot about podcasting in the rest of the episode. We will be back next week with more on making work and life fit together.
Thanks for listening. You can find me, Sarah, at theshoebox.com. or at @the_shoebox on Instagram.
And you can find me, Laura, at lauravanderkam.com. This has been the Best of Both Worlds podcast. Please join us next time for more on making work and life work together.